As discussed earlier, the architectural principles of Hindu temples in India described in Shilpa Shastra mentions three main types of temple architecture. Nagara or the northern style, the Dravida or the southern style, and the Visara or mixed style. The Nagara style of temple architecture is already discussed in the previous video. Now let us proceed towards South Indian style of temple architecture. Let us begin with an introduction. Dravidian architecture or the South Indian temple style emerged in the southern part of the Indian subcontinent or South India and in Sri Lanka during the closing decades of the 7th century, reaching its final form by the 16th century. Dravidian style of temple architecture is characterized by its typical features. The main difference between the temples of Dravidian style and those of Nagara style is that the temples of the former style were not built on any raised platform from the ground level, unlike of the latter style of temple architecture. Unlike the Nagara temples, the Dravida temples are enclosed within a compound wall. The front wall has an entrance gateway in its center, which is known as Gopura or Gopuram. The shape of the main temple tower, known as Vimana, Shikara in Nagara style. The Vimana is like a stepped pyramid that rises up linearly rather than curving shikaras of North India. In South India, the word shikara is used for the crowning element at the top of the temple, which is usually shaped like a small stupika or an octagonal cupola. This is similar to the Amalaka or Kalasha of Nagara temples. In the Dravidian style of temple architecture, unlike images in North India, we can see the sculptures of fierce Dwarpalas or doorkeepers, Mithun and Yaksha, guarding the temple. It is common to find a large water reservoir or a temple tank enclosed within the complex. Subsidiary shrines are either incorporated within the main temple tower or located as distinct separate small shrines beside the main temple. During the 8th to 12th centuries, the role of the temple was not limited to religious matters alone. Temples became rich administrative centers controlling vast areas of land. Now shifting towards divisions of Dravida temples. Just as there are many subdivisions of the main types of Nagara temples, there are subdivisions also of Dravida temples. These are basically of 5 different shapes: Kuta or Katur Asra, square shaped; Shala or Ayat Asra, rectangular shape; Gaja-prishta or Vrittayata or elephant backed, elliptical; and Vritta, circular. Now let us focus on the Pallava style of temple architecture. The Pallavas were one of the ancient South Indian dynasties and were active in Andhra region from the 2nd century onwards and moved southwards to settle in Tamil Nadu. Although they were mostly Shaivite, several Vaishnava shrines also survived from their reign, and there is no doubt that they were influenced by the long Buddhist history of the decade. Their early buildings, it is generally believed, were rock cut, while the later ones were structural. The earlier buildings are generally attributed to the reign of Mahendravarman I, a contemporary of the Chalukya king Pulakesin II of Karnataka. Narasimhavarman I, also known as Mamala, inaugurated most of the building works at Mahabalipuram, which came to be known after him as Mammalapuram. The shore temple at Mahabalipuram was built later, probably in the reign of Narasimhavarman II, also known as Rajasimha, who reigned from 700 to 728 CE. The shore temple is a structural temple and was built during the reign of Narasimhavarman II, also known as Rajasimha. The temple is facing east towards the sea and has three shrines, east and west to Shiva, and the middle for Vishnu, Ananta Shaila. This is unusual because temples generally have a single main shrine and not three areas of worship. This shows that it was probably not originally conceived like this, and different shrines may be added at different point of times. In the compound, there is evidence of a water tank, an early example of Gopuram, and several other images. Sculpture of the bull Nandi, Shiva's mount, lines the temple walls. The temple has suffered severe disfiguration due to erosion by saltwater-laden air over the centuries. Now, looking at the classification of Pallava temple architecture. The Pallava temple architecture can be classified into four groups according to the rulers and the features of temples they constructed. The first one is Mahendravarman group between 600 to 625 AD. Early temples of the Pallavas belong to King Mahendravarman I, 7th century. They were rock-cut temples, may be influenced by rock-cut architecture. Examples: Mahendravadi, Tiruchirappalli, etc. Shifting towards second, that is Narasimha or Mammala group between 625 to 674 AD. It is the second stage of Pallava architecture which started when Narasimhavarman I, Mammala, came to the throne. The architecture is represented by monolithic rocks. The monolithic rathas or mandapas of Mammalapuram are examples. The 5 rathas are popularly known as Pancha Pandava rathas. The third one is Rajasimha group between 674 to 800 AD. The group was under Narasimhavarman II, who was also known as Rajasimha. He introduced the structural temples and Gobara style in Pallava architecture. The Kailashnath temple at Kanchi and the Shore temple at Mahabalipuram are some of the examples. And the last one is Nandivaram group between 800 to 900 AD. Architecture mainly under the Pallava king Nandivarman Pallava. They also represented structural temples. The temples were generally small compared to the other groups. The Vaikunda Perumal temple, Tirunelveli, and Mukteshwara temple are some of the examples. Let us shift towards the Chola style of temple architecture. The Cholas of the Tanjore line, also known as the Imperial Cholas, ruled over most of the south for about 4 centuries, that is 875 to 1175 AD. The early Chola temples were not large. Example: Vijayalaya, Cholishwara temple and the Brahmapurishwara temple, etc. By the beginning of the 11th century, large temples were built, owing to royal patronage, which had already been seen during the Pallava period. The best example is the Brihadeshwara temple at Tanjore. The temple is also known as Rajarajeshwara temple. It was completed around 1009 by Rajaraja Chola and is the largest and tallest of all Indian temples. The temple's pyramidal multi-storied Vimana rises a massive 70 meters, topped by a monolithic Shikhara, and the Kalasha on top by itself is about 3 meters and 8 centimeters in height. The main deity of the temple is Shiva, who is shown as a huge lingam set in a 2-storied sanctum. Painted murals and sculptures decorate the walls surrounding the sanctum. It is in this temple that one notices for the first time 2 large gopurams or gateway towers with an elaborate sculptural program which was conceived along with the temple. The Brihadeshwara temple is part of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization or UNESCO World Heritage Site among the great living Chola temples. In the next episode of the series, we will go through and understand the Deccan or Visara style temple architecture. Until then, stay tuned and stay updated. To watch our videos in Hindi, subscribe to our Hindi YouTube channel Drishti IAS.